There's a new day in America between Christians and Jews. We don't agree on everything, but we agree on this, that we are going to be together, inseparable in the defense of Israel and the Jewish people.
US National Security Advisor Brzezinski flew to Pakistan to set about rallying resistance. He wanted to arm the Mujahideen without revealing America's role. On the Afghan border near the Khyber Pass, he urged the soldiers of God to redouble their efforts.
We know of their deep belief in God, and we are confident that their struggle will succeed. That land over there is yours. You'll go back to it one day because your fight will prevail and you'll have your homes and your mosques back again because your cause is right and God is on your side.
We said, you know what? That was like a pretty good idea. Let's deal with the ISI and the Pakistani military, and let's go recruit these Mujahideen, and let's get some to come from Saudi Arabia and other places, importing their Wahhabi brand of Islam so that we can go beat the Soviet Union. And guess what? They retreated, they lost billions of dollars, and it led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. So there's a very strong argument, which is, it wasn't a bad investment to end the Soviet Union, but let's be careful what we sow because we will harvest. So we then left Pakistan. We said, okay, fine, you deal with the stingers that we've left all over your country. You deal with the mines that are along the border. And by the way, we don't want to have anything to do with you. In fact, we're sanctioning you.
The Department of Homeland Security handed out $130 billion to private contractors. This is the disaster capitalism complex, a new economy built on fear.
This will be a monumental struggle of good versus evil. The best defense against terror is a global offensive against terror, wherever it might be found.
The first phase of this war was the bombing of Afghanistan. The Taliban government was quickly overthrown. The aftermath of the war was more complicated.
Terror is not about one man, and it is not about one country.
Instead, George Bush chose to target Iraq, a country with the third largest oil reserves in the world.
Now, about the Defense Department's war plan. It is not like that for the Gulf War. It's more along the lines of the Panama invasion of 1989. CBS News has been told it would start on what's called A Day. A as in airstrikes. Airstrikes so devastating, they would leave Saddam's soldiers unable or unwilling to fight. The idea is to rain down the thunder so hard as to create, quote, shock and awe.
If the Pentagon sticks to its current war plan, one day in March, the Air Force and Navy will launch between 300 and 400 cruise missiles at targets in Iraq. More than were launched during the entire 40 days of the first Gulf War. The sheer size of this has never been seen before, never been contemplated before. Harlan Ullman is one of the authors of the shock and awe concept, which relies on large numbers of precision-guided weapons.
So that you have this simultaneous effect, rather like the nuclear weapons at Hiroshima, not taking days or weeks, but in minutes. You also take the city down. By that I mean you get rid of their power, their water, and you begin this relentless campaign to wear them down so that 2, 3, 4, 5 days they are physically, emotionally, and psychologically exhausted.
Last night, a square mile in central Baghdad seemed like hell on earth.
During the first wave of the bombing, the citizens of Baghdad suffered a version of the sensory deprivation described in the Kubart manual. The US did little to stop the looting. Some US officials even thought it gave them a head start on dismantling the Iraqi state. John Agresto, Director of Higher Education Reconstruction, said he saw the looting of schools as the opportunity for a clean start.
We had 3 distinct forms of shock that were all working together and reinforcing each other. You had the shock of the war, which was immediately followed by economic shock therapy imposed under Paul Bremer. And as resistance to that economic transformation, that very rapid economic shock grew, you had the shock of enforcement, including torture. 3 different kinds of shock.
In May 2003, Paul Bremer was appointed US envoy to Iraq. 2 weeks after he arrived, he declared the country open for business.
We considered that the coalition had very broad authorities to determine the direction of the Iraqi economy.
Bremer knew little of Iraq, but he knew about disaster capitalism. He had launched crisis consulting practice at the start of the Homeland Security boom.
Today is a very important day in Baghdad.
Bremer spent the first 4 months passing classic Chicago school laws.
Investment in the future of Afghanistan and Iraq is the greatest commitment of its kind since the Marshall Plan.
But in fact, it was just the opposite. Whereas the Marshall Plan was intended to boost European industries, US aid money in Iraq was spent on US corporations. Creative associates received contracts worth $100 million to draft the curriculum and print new textbooks for the education system. Management and technology consultant Bearing Point was awarded contracts worth $240 million to build a market-driven system in Iraq. North Carolina-based RTI received contracts worth $466 million to advise on bringing democracy to Iraq. Halliburton was awarded $20 billion in cost-plus Iraqi contracts. Parsons was handed $186 million to build 142 health clinics. Only 6 were ever completed. The basic electricity and water supplies hardly improved, despite billions being spent in the first 4 years.
الأمريكان يقتلون النساء ويعتقلون النساء ويقتلون الأطفال ويهينون الشيوخ ويقتلون الشباب. أمريكا بحالها هي الإرهاب.